Well, how you doing? Mr. DJ is back, and I'm back on the 80s and 90s YouTube channel, going to count down fantasy playlists going all the way back 30 years ago, the week of June 13th, 1986. Some of the ads that I made that week, well, I got Bruce Springsteen down, but I didn't write down the name of the record. There it is right there. You see Bruce Springsteen on top, but I might have been the song War, the Edwin Starr remake. Sweet Freedom by Michael McDonald. Rumors by Timex Social Club, Higher Love by Steve Winwood, Words Get in the Way by Miami Sound Machine, We Don't Have to Take Our Clothes Off by Jermaine Stewart. All these songs would be big hits in the summer of '86. Also, Kind of Magic by Queen on here. I hadn't heard that in years. Might try to throw that in later on as a top 40 extra. But let's go into the top 40 of my fantasy playlist of June 13th, 1986. My goodness, 30 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long. 3 debuts. And the first debut is a group they were compared. They sound an awful lot like Bruce Springsteen and E Street Band. John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band. Boy, talk about Lost 45 at number 40 making his debut. Voice of America's Sons is from the movie called Cobra, part of the soundtrack to the movie Cobra, which stars Sylvester Stallone. I've forgotten all about that movie. A young Sylvester Stallone, I would say. The song, well, first off, a little bit of history on John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band. The success was a long time coming for this band, formed back in the 1970s in Rhode Island. First hint of success came in 1980. They put out a couple of singles. Well, two singles. Well, two singles sort of together like an A and B side, I believe, and it was called Wild Summer Nights, paired with Tender Years. Sold 10,000 copies. It was played on some of the radio stations up and down the eastern seaboard, but was not a national hit, although Tender Years would be later re-released. Became a big hit for John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band. They're really big. This was just incredible. A plum was just handed right to them, landed right in their lap. A guy named Kenny Fance. He goes back to the 50s. I'll talk about Kenny Fance briefly in just a minute. Kenny Fance was producing a movie called Eddie and the Cruisers. It was based on a novel about a rock and roll bar band. He wanted John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band to write the soundtrack, the music soundtrack to this movie, and they did. And boy, it was a smash. On the Dark Side by John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band. First, God, I remember the piano, and then John Cafferty just barked those vocals right over the piano. Just awesome record. Went to number 7 on Billboard's Hot 100. And then after that, it was Tender Years. Tender Years came out. Re-released late '84, early '85, and that was a laid back record. I do remember. Boy, these memories are coming back on these songs. Tough All Over was the album that came after that, featured C.I.T.Y. Boy, more memories of Lost 45 by John Cafferty from the summer of 1985. The memories are vivid on this record. That Tough All Over was also put out as a single. I would say probably in the fall of '85, but I'm not sure. And then, of course, we got Voice of America's Sons. One note about Kenny Fance. He also produced this album, by the way, Tough All Over. Kenny Fance goes back to the 50s. He was 15 years old. He was a band called the Harbor Lights. Might have been based on that song by the Platters, the Harbor Lights. But 15 years old when he joined this group. In 1959, he put out a couple of singles. Didn't do anything. But Kenny Fance was one of the founding members of Jay and the Americans. She Cried in 1962. Come a Little Bit Closer in the summer of '64. Followed by Let's Lock the Door and Throw Away the Key in the fall of '64, early '65. Carmia in the summer of '65. Sunday and Me in 1965. And I also found out that he co-wrote one of my favorite records by Jay and the Americans. I always forget the name of the record, Living Above Your Head. Yes, awesome vocals by Jay Black on that record. Co-written by Kenny Fance. So here he is, producing John Cafferty 20 years later. Voice of America's Sons making its debut at number 40 on my fantasy playlist of June 13th, 1986.